From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, the memo.
You figure that one out.
That was how President Trump responded on Friday to a reporter's questions as to whether the so-called Nunes memo has lessened his confidence in Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and whether he might now fire Mr. Rosenstein. Compiled by House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, the memo purports to show evidence of FBI malpractice in an investigation of former Trump campaign official Carter Page. Specifically, the memo declassified by the president and released on Friday claims that the FBI wrongly relied on a dossier compiled by former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele. Nunes says that the FBI used Steele's dossier to gain a surveillance warrant against Page. That was wrong, Nunes says, because Steele was biased against Trump. Democrats, however, are furious. They say the memo is a partisan Republican effort to distract from special counsel Robert Mueller's ongoing investigation of possible Trump campaign collusion with Russia.
Okay, well, first I want to say that hopefully the viewers will appreciate my vocals there more. We've sorted that out, or I have sorted that out. But first question, how does this affect Robert Mueller's investigation? And does it make more likely my prediction last week that he will be fired by May 1?
I'm not sure Mueller will be fired, frankly, but I'll tell you what it does. Is the FBI relied for its primary source of information to get these intelligence wiretaps and surveillance done on the Trump campaign. It relied upon what the dirt diving operation of the Clinton campaign and all it produced. The result of this is to discredit to a degree the investigation going on.
But it's only Nunes' take, isn't it?
But it contaminates, I think, the Mueller investigation. It may result in an investigation of the investigators. So overall, I think what it does, it utterly politicizes the operation investigating Trump. But I will say this, Mueller didn't arrive until all these sins had been committed.
Contamination, Eleanor?
No. First of all, you don't know that the FISA court relied solely on that dossier. There could be many other material. The dossier was produced, we'll get a transcript of what McCabe said. The dossier was produced originally by a right-leaning conservative media firm before it was picked up by the Dems, so it wasn't solely there.
No.
So the memo was a bombshell that was a dud, basically. And it has strengthened Rosenstein's solidity, I believe, at the Department of Justice. You had Attorney General Sessions commending him on Friday, saying he and his deputy, Rachel Brand, are just the kind of people we like working for us at the Justice Department. And so they're not going to be resigning. They're standing up to this president. And this president has made himself more vulnerable. He's picked a fight with the wrong people. You can't outrun the law. And he may use the memo to say to his base, I can't talk to Mueller, he's biased, and he'll probably do that to try to get out of testifying. But this is a fight that the president can't win.
Okay, well, Clarence, so Eleanor says it's a dud, like a Second World War bomb they occasionally find in London. Pat says it's the atomic bomb. What is it?
It's fake news. It's a battle of fake news. I mean, let's step back. This is all being driven by Donald Trump around and a job, as Pat mentioned, a group that was anti-Trump during the Republican primary started this investigation, and they turned to Christopher Steele because he's an expert on Russia, and we want to follow the path here, and then it winds up back in the Hillary Clinton campaign, but Steele has an ongoing relationship with FBI folks. They've constantly shared information routinely. All of a sudden now Donald Trump, in order to distract attention away from the Mueller investigation, has painted this picture of this conspiracy that just does not exist.
Clarence,
And
they
that's
deceive
why
Well, let's let
Kelsey's
turn.
They deceived the FISA judge. They didn't tell him the truth.
Kelsey's turn.
We don't know.
Kelsey's turn. Kelsey's
You don't
turn.
know.
Kelsey, what do you think? Wait. Kelsey's turn. I'm the commander. Kelsey.
Look, we have one memo, and depending on your political affiliations, we have a broad range of conclusions. happening. So clearly we need more facts before we know what actually happened.
Right.
But let me take what I think is the middle ground here, and that is to say what we have is campaign opposition research that was used at least in part to justify the spying of a U.S. citizen. I think no matter your political affiliations, that should be highly problematic. But moreover, so I actually think whether it was a few bad actors in the DOJ and the FBI, whatever actually happened, it should be alarming, because what we are talking about is a very important process and institution in our U.S. government, and that is the courts that are protecting us from the worst types of attacks Americans can face, terrorist attacks. And for this process to be undermined, to be used as a political weapon, I think is a really sad day for all Americans.
And it is undermined.
That has not been approved. We don't know what the FISA court was looking at entirely, and if you had to depend only on information that came from morally high people where everything was a biblical certitude, what would law enforcement investigators have to work with?
Let me
Excuse me.
Okay.
Christopher Steele is a highly regarded former British intelligence agent who had, as Clarence said, a pre-existing relationship with the FBI.
And he had a pre-existing hatred. Pre-existing hatred of Donald Trump.
90% of that memo, 90% of the dossier is been proven.
Okay, look, this dossier relied, according to McCabe himself, indispensably upon a dirt diving operation by a British spy using Russian agents, and the FBI used this material to go after an individual. Carter Page is not Alger Hiss.
But let me ask
was it accurate?
Let me ask you a question,
Was this a justified investigation? Was it a justified investigation
Wait. I want to ask Clarence something. This is very important. Perceptibly, though,
well, this is the same issue
hasn't
she
it
raised.
destabilized the investigation or has this just been, is it a mess?
Well, what's the investigation about? Was it justified to look at Carter Page as a possible Soviet spy? That's the issue that everybody's avoiding
Russian
here.
Spy,
I'm sorry. Okay, Russian spy. I know. I'm an old man. Pardon me. But the
three times they lied. They lied to the FISA judge or deceived him about whether he was a spy.
Pat, you see, that's what I mean. That's the fog. The issue is, was Christopher Steele's information reliable? And we're finding that more.
All right, exit question. Enough. No, we have enough. Exit question on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the risk factor involved with swimming with saltwater crocodiles while intoxicated, and 1 being the average amusement of rating and GIFs on Twitter. How likely is Trump to fire Rosenstein within the next 4 weeks, Pat? 1 to 10. Number.
I would say a 3. But look, this thing is unfolding. The whole investigation has been contaminated, politicized. People are looking at Mueller, not for Mueller's fault.
Contaminated.
Wait, Eleanor.
Who contaminated it? Donald Trump contaminated it. He contaminated it, along with help from Fox News folks.
I give it a 3 also. And Carter Page was surveilled by the FBI since 2013. He lived in Moscow. He was actively recruited to be a Russian spy, so there was every reason to continue to watch him once you see him show up.
Why didn't they indict him?
Wait, Clarence is done.
Clarence is done. If he's a spy.
Information's not.
Clarence is done. Come on.
The investigation's still going on, Pat. You don't want to investigate. What's your number? Indict somebody. I think actually the chances look better for him to survive. Yeah, because
surviving. You think he'll survive?
Well, yeah. I mean, firing him now only makes Trump look even more suspicious.
1 or 2 or 3.
Believe me, Tom, this is all turning against Trump now. We're starting to find out, especially when they go and when Nunes' committee goes and releases. Then why is Nunes releasing the Republican side of this?
Why are you so agitated,
Kelsey, what is your number?
I'm going to say 1. I think Democrats would love to see Trump fire Mueller. I don't think it's going to happen. It's not in Trump's interest.
Okay, all right. We do need to move on, but that was very exciting. That was energetic.
But
we have to move on.
If Rosenstein goes, I would like to have him stand up and say, Mr. President, have you no shame?
Okay. When we come back, State of the Union, domestic and foreign, and a question of specialness and for unique, insightful, original content, please make sure to visit our Twitter page at McLaughlin Group and our website, McLaughlin.com. And I'm going to have a breather on the break.
In 1957, when we became a Mercedes-Benz dealer, there were only 35 in the entire USA. We were honored to receive the 60th anniversary award from Mercedes-Benz. You know, Mark, when we started out, we only had 4 new Mercedes.
I think our inventory is a little bit bigger today than it was then.
Over our 80-year history, we've sold as many as 10 different makes of cars. But Mercedes is the one. That's our passion.
Issue 2, State of the Union.
President Trump this week delivered his first State of the Union address to Congress. Outlining his legislative ambitions for the coming year, the president received many a standing ovation from Republicans and many a solemn stare from Democrats. Here's what the president had to say on the domestic front.
I am asking both parties to come together to give us safe, fast, reliable, and modern infrastructure that our economy needs and our people deserve. Tonight, I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs. In recent weeks, 2 terrorist attacks in New York were made possible by the visa lottery and chain migration. In the age of terrorism, these programs present risks we can just no longer afford. In 2016, we lost 64,000 Americans to drug overdoses, 174 deaths per day, 7 per hour. We must get much tougher on drug dealers and pushers if we are going to succeed in stopping this scourge. In our drive to make Washington accountable, we have eliminated more regulations in our first year than any administration in the history of our country.
Question, Pat, will Trump get $1.5 trillion, and are Republicans the main obstacle to that number if he tries to get it?
I don't know that he will get it, but I think the real part of the Trump speech was those anecdotes and stories of American citizens who had performed brilliantly and ably and courageously, one after another. At the same time, the Democrats were just appalling in their reaction. They didn't even applaud for black unemployment being down. Clarence, I'll tell you this,
Which went back up the next day.
According to CBS, a very neutral network, 75% of the American people loved Donald Trump's speech.
Well, I don't think the Republicans were very gracious to Barack Obama. They sat on their hands. So that kind of theater is expected at the State of the Union. This was Trump trying to be Ronald Reagan, with all the stories. And I think it was effective. But the speech itself was fantasy land. It's divorced. He doesn't have any legislative proposals. On infrastructure, he wants to sell off public roads and privatize them so we have more toll roads. He's nowhere nearer to getting any kind of a deal on DACA, and he pretty much associated the Dreamers with MS-13 and chain migration. That's how his family got here. My family got here, and probably yours too.
Clarence, do you think, I mean, the infrastructure though, surely that is something that Democrats would want to jump on, no?
Well, the thing Trump didn't go into was that while everybody loves infrastructure, they like a different kind of way of getting there. Republicans want tax breaks and other incentives, while Democrats want direct spending. Those are 2 different worlds, and that's where our politics are these days. And that was exemplified by this speech. What our State of the Union speech is good for now? Political theater. That's not a bad thing, but it's a very interesting thing. Pat is right. I wrote a column comparing Trump with Reagan. Our 2 presidents who come out of the world of showbiz, who know how to do a State of the Union visually. Reagan brought the idea. What was his name? Lenny Skutnik.
Lenny Skutnik,
the hero at National Airport, public worker. Reagan put him up in the balcony, put the spotlight on him, and that was the beginning of having the folks in the audience. I think Trump has had more people, certainly more airtime devoted to these folks than any previous president.
Wait, Kelsey's turn. Kelsey, what was your takeaway from this?
I think that communications is not always one of President Trump's strong suits. I think the speech shows what happens when he sticks to the script. and doesn't go on Twitter and get involved with the political sideshows. I think the personal stories, I agree with you, they were inspiring, and I think just hearing your remarks on it, it's much more difficult for you to demonize President Trump on this topic than it is in his everyday actions.
Yeah,
but I do think he will follow up with a lot of his proposals. I disagree with you. I think he did talk about a lot of important policies, maybe on infrastructure. We take it with a grain of salt because he does tend to exaggerate how bad our roads and bridges are. But I think he wants to reach across the aisle. We saw that in his speech, and that's what I expect to happen this year.
How did Nancy Pelosi perform, Tom? How did you think that was?
Well, look, I think that it's the pageantry of politics.
I
We are
want to
in a
say
win-
every president traditionally after the State of the Union goes out to sell their program.
Okay, the foreign front.
Go
The foreign
anywhere.
front. We got more to do. Foreign front.
In addition to his domestic priorities, the president also outlined an array of foreign policy plans. These include an order to keep open the terrorist detention facilities at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to renegotiate the Iran deal, and to continue pressuring North Korea.
Past experience has taught us that complacency and concessions only invite aggression and provocation. I will not repeat the mistakes of past administrations that got us into this very dangerous position. I am asking Congress to address the fundamental flaws in the terrible Iran nuclear deal. My administration has also imposed tough sanctions on the communist and socialist dictatorships in Cuba and Venezuela.
Question, Kelsey, do you think the president took a slightly less tough line here on North Korea? He didn't pledge military action if, progress on the diplomatic front doesn't occur. What do you think?
I appreciated his remarks in relation to North Korea, and I actually think President Trump's success on the international front is one of the most underreported stories of the Trump administration of the last year. I think everybody tries to demonize him and focus on these sideshows, but he's actually been very successful in the war against ISIS. Yep. He set us up for success on that front. North Korea is a difficult issue that Democrats and Republicans, there's no easy answer on, and I think President Trump has delivered.
On North Korea, he's hinting that military action may be in the cards. And while he was speaking, the White House was withdrawing the nomination of the new ambassador to South Korea. We don't even have an ambassador, Mr. Cha, because he is objecting to the administration's bloody nose strategy of preemptive
But isn't his
strike.
job to support the president on policy?
Well, no, I agree with Victor Cha dropped out.
The point is that the policy that this administration is producing, the Pentagon is now resisting because the White House wants more options for military strikes. They don't want to give them to him because they're afraid he's going to use one.
Look, exactly. I mean, I agree with Victor Cha. Look, he doesn't believe in a war, and he thinks that option's on the table. And quite frankly, a bloody nose attack on North Korea, if they're thinking of that, they better think of the consequences, which could be hundreds of thousands of dead South Koreans and Americans.
That's right. And I have to say, as far as setting up the defeat of ISIS, that was President Obama who set this up.
Well, he did change the rules of engagement, though, didn't
I
he?
congratulate, that's fine. I congratulate whatever achievements the President Trump has had on his watch. But the fact is that he didn't have very much about foreign affairs in this speech because he doesn't really care that much about it except as a symbol that he can use with appealing to his base. That's why the lunacy of a bloody nose strategy is even being talked about right
Clarence,
now.
let me ask you a specific question.
There is no military option for North Korea.
Even Steve Bannon's right to tell him that.
Not just North Korea, though. He did mention Iran. Do you think the president will be able to persuade the Europeans, President Macron of France is the main one, to be able to support strengthening, as he sees it, the Iran nuclear deal?
My personal view is I see the Europeans and others turning away from the U.S. and trying to contain
the nuclear deal. Look, and there's some good news with Iran. For the last 5 months, the Iranian patrol boats have stopped running around the American warships. There's some kind of signal being sent. But look, the Iranian nuclear deal, quite frankly, I think is in the interest of the United States.
Kelsey, do you think it's in the interest of the United States? Speak for me.
I'm not a big fan of the Iran deal, but I think President Trump is going about it cautiously. He is not making brash decisions on this issue, and I think that's something we should all appreciate.
I applaud that. Yes, thank you. More caution.
6 other nations, including our allies, are all in on the deal. So he's a lone ranger on this.
Okay. All right. Very good discussion there. Issue 3, not so special.
We face growing threats from revisionist powers as different as China and Russia are from each other, nations that do seek to create a world consistent with their authoritarian models, pursuing veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions.
I don't think that we necessarily, Robert, regard China as a clear and present threat at the moment.
Speaking just 3 days apart, the US Defense Secretary and the head of Britain's army offered dramatically diverging views on China. And as she visited Beijing this week, Prime Minister Theresa May spoke of a British-Chinese, quote-unquote, global strategic partnership. Put simply, when it comes to China, America and its closest ally are increasingly divided. Where the US is concerned by Chinese efforts to militarize the Indo-Pacific and rewrite rules of international order, Britain sees China as a crucial and very lucrative trading partner for the post-Brexit era.
Pat, is Britain putting cash before the special relationship?
Well, the British are, the empire's over, Tom. I'm sorry
It
to tell
is?
you. They're gone
It still
from
renders in
Singapore.
my voice,
They're
surely.
gone from Singapore and Hong Kong. And look, and they're very much, the British are a commercial power. The Americans are the ones that are in the Western Pacific. And there's a growing collision because China is a rising power. It runs a huge trade surplus, using the money to expand. It's got the Road and Belt program. And you're going to run into basic collision with the United States. They're already doing that in the South China Sea. But frankly, you know, I think the United States is going to have to adjust itself to the fact that Russia and China are now our revisionist powers, and they have their own agenda.
Yeah, and China is the rising superpower, and they are playing the UK and the US off each other, and Theresa May is under a lot of pressure to prove that Brexit really didn't matter, that they're still a strong trading partner. And you know, this is the result also of the president's withdrawal from the world stage under the guise of the America First policy. When icebergs break up, the pieces go in lots of different directions, and that's what we're seeing play out on
Clarence,
the world stage.
to offer a counterpoint there, perhaps this is a rendering of proof of President Trump's America First policy that Britain is acting as Britain first. What do you think about that?
And China's acting as China first, and they're delighted to see him pulling out of the trade partnerships in the Pacific, because they were really designed to try to contain China. Now the opposite is happening.
Yeah, pulling out of the TPP was a gift to China.
I fear that the UK is going to learn the hard way that it might not be in their best interest to get so economically entwined with China. But I will say, bigger picture, I am not that worried about our special relationship with the UK.
Special relationship is going to stay. It's built on shared sacrifice in 2 world wars, culture, language. As Bismarck said, the most important fact of the 21st century is that the Americans speak English.
Who do you think is the best British Prime Minister from the great imperial age?
I think Lord Salisbury was as good as they come.
Very good answer. All right, I like that.
He was the one guy in Rhodesia.
Well, I want to throw a little curveball here.
They named the capital for him.
Yes, that's right. I was there. Good.
Another question here, though. With India, as now President Trump and President Obama both made a big effort with Prime Minister Modi of India. India is very upset about what China is doing in the border region with some of this trade routes. Do you think India could be the new special relationship partner? Let's go right. Clarence, what do you think?
Boy, that's a big leap, I think. But I think we may be moving in that direction because we're already partnered commercially so much.
Why do we have to contain China in their quarrel with India? Why is that our quarrel?
Well, what about economic interests with China, with India, with the economic growth, young population?
Oh, it's the 5th ranking economic power in the world now.
And as they get wealthier, more iPhones. They're going to buy iPhones, Pat.
We don't need to have another ally. We got about 60 of them right now.
And Prime Minister Modi just promised he would deliver on health care.
I saw that.
Which
That
is
was
extraordinary, actually.
That's right.
Do you have any thoughts about India or British Prime Ministers in the imperial age?
I'll just say that, look, the Prince Harry is about to marry American. I'm
Meghan
really not,
Markle.
I'm really not worried about our relationship with the UK. It's about to get better.
As an American who grew up in Britain, that's very important for the royal family because they need some fresh blood in there. There's too much inbreeding over the decades. Anyway, we will be right back with predictions.
I think the fact that we're family owned and operated means all the way down the line that we're going to be here for the future. We're not owned by some corporation that's out of town.
Typically in the automotive business, there's a lot of turnover. I think when you create a family environment, people want to stay and they are proud of the organization.
The family extends right down to the employees, and our family is Mercedes-Benz of Arlington.
Predictions, Pat.
Pope Francis has allowed the Communist Chinese government to pick his bishops for him, a dozen of them, and the reaction from traditionalists and others could lead to a virtual schism in the Roman Catholic Church, with traditionalists and conservatives speaking out more and more against the Pope.
Wow.
Okay. Thanks to Robert Mueller, we're going to learn a lot more about Hope Hicks and her role in the potential obstruction of justice case. A phone call where she allegedly said that emails from Donald Trump Jr. about that infamous meeting at Trump Tower would, quote, never see the light of day. She is the closest aide to the president, the longest serving aide, and how she got to where she is outlined in a Town and Country profile by yours truly.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Kelsey.
I predict that the first female president in the United States is going to be a Republican.
Nikki Haley, you think?
That's who I'm rooting
Okay.
for.
Clarence?
She may be right. I think we're going to, we've just seen the first of what I expect will be 2, maybe 3 market corrections before the midterm elections, the day after the State of the Union, you know. I think this will somewhat dampen President Trump's constant bragging about the stock market, because he doesn't want to claim too much credit for how the market moves.
All right. In dutiful humility to my American heritage, or my Irish American heritage, I'm going to vote that the New England Patriots will win this weekend. And here's a random fact. This week is the 50th anniversary of North Vietnam's Tet Offensive. Today we remember all those Americans who held the line in that battle, specifically Corporal Robert Edward Hall of the U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Hall was killed 50 years ago today. He was 20 years old, and his service to the Republic is forever listed on the memorial wall. Thank you, panelists and viewers. Thank you very much for that fun discussion, especially issue 1. And make sure to follow us at McLaughlin Group on Twitter and visit our website, mclaughlin.com. See us next week.